About 20% of our practice comes from sports-related injuries.
Whether you're an intense athlete, exercise a lot, or just play sports for fun, your feet could be feeling a little abused. Foot and ankle injuries are one of the most common athletic injuries. That includes an estimated 27,000 ankle sprains in the U.S. every day. Legacy Health Systems podiatrist Remmers says he sees sports-related injuries on a regular basis. He says some can easily be treated with a trip to the doctor, but knowing when to see an expert is important.
Soft tissue injuries, whether they're sprains or strains, can be treated at home, with our standard of rest, ice, compression, and elevation. Use of anti-inflammatories if it's appropriate. And most of the time things will get better. When it becomes concerning is if you don't see a rapid improvement over 48 to 72 hours, and it either is worsening or not improving, then it should be seen.
Dr. Remmers says a good shoe that fits well and is comfortable is the most important thing for keeping feet healthy. A store that specializes in your sport, like this running store, can help you do that. They'll be able to analyze your foot and your stride and fit you into a shoe that's appropriate for your level of activity.
Most sports now and most shoe companies have realized that there are sport-specific shoes. Most important with a shoe, I think, is that you have the proper length so you don't have trauma to the end of your toes, and toenails end up taking the brunt of that. And also that it well fits around your heel, what's called the heel counter, that encapsulates your heel and doesn't allow it to slide and slip as you do your activities, because that can lead to blisters and also increased motion in the foot that would be considered abnormal that can cause injury. Don't be afraid to spend the time that it takes in the store to make sure that the foot and the shoe end up being compatible for each other. Whether that means putting the shoe on in the store, walking for 20 minutes before you decide whether or not that shoe is going to cause you any problems.
Feet and ankles also need a break, and experts say cross-training is the perfect way to do that.
If you're someone who wants to run a lot, on your days where you're doing your light activities, instead of running, which will continue to put the same strain through your foot, switch to bicycling, try swimming, which is a great activity for the feet because you don't have the weight-bearing component while still getting the cardiovascular benefits. I think this is where we're starting to see problems with repetitive injuries in children, where we didn't used to see it when they, whatever the sport of the season was is what they played. Now that children are focusing more on one sport and wearing that shoe all the time and doing that same activity, we're starting to see them get the same injury patterns that we see in adults that we didn't see in the past.
Stretching is also key to safe exercise, but the theory of stretching has changed in recent years.
The old theory was that you should stretch before you do any sports activity. We found now that it actually works better if you will warm up before stretching. So a period of light activity for 10 to 15 minutes to warm up, to allow blood flow to increase to the area, allow lubrication of tendons and joints that come along with increased activity, and then go into your stretching routine.
All in all, Dr. Remmers says moderation and a slow buildup is the key to healthy exercise for your feet and for the rest of your body.
The hard thing, whether it's an adult or kids, is sometimes they get into an activity and they start it full-blown training, hours a day, and instead of allowing their body to adjust to that new activity and allow their muscles and their soft tissues to adapt to a new training regimen, and there just has to be a build-up period to decrease the chance of getting these acute injuries.